Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I am bringing the final installment of the Hegelian Dialectic and Compulsory Schooling series, and this topic is Censoring Truth. I'll tell you what, this series has been quite a thought exercise for me, because although I have had these ideas in my head for quite some time, putting them down on paper or expressing them orally, it's really tricky, because I want to make sure that I convey everything accurately, and I also want to make sure that I don't forget anything, because there is just so much information that I really would like to share with you. So first of all, just as a rehash of what the Hegelian dialectic is, what that actually is just problem, reaction, solution. An entity, usually the government, and that's what I'm talking about in this case, creates a problem. There is an expected reaction, or sometimes unexpected, I'm thinking, and then the government then steps in and offers the solution for it. They offer the solution for the very problem that they created, which most people don't realize. And before I actually get into the whole idea of censorship, you're probably wondering, what does censoring truth have to do with compulsory schooling? I'm sure that a lot of you realize that there's censorship happening everywhere, but it isn't really something that you will associate with school. And I will get into that, but first let's just go over each step of the problem, reaction, solution with this censoring of truth. So first of all, we have the problem, and this is just like a basic general summary of what the problem is. So first of all, we have the infiltration of the media. The media is now authorized to act as government propaganda. We had the CIA hearings of Operation Mockingbird back in the 60s, where they admitted to putting CIA plants into news organizations so that they would spread certain information. We just have really a lot of lies that are exposed, that we have been force-fed through our government. A lot of times, a lot of false flag operations that they are perpetrating on us because they want us to get this expected, reaction, problem, reaction, solution. So those are just some of the ways that the censorship of truth has been happening, turned into a problem, with things like Operation Mockingbird, and with the mainstream media now acting as government propaganda. You're not being given the truth anymore. You are being given what they want to give to you. So that in itself is a censorship of truth. When you are constantly being lied to, or when events are being created to look like one thing when in fact they are really something else, that is also a censorship of truth. You are not getting the whole picture of what is going on. So as this has been happening, over time, one thing that maybe they expected this, maybe they didn't, but with the invention of the internet and Google search and everything, people have been able to find out that these things are really happening. And so it has elicited a reaction. Again, I don't know if this reaction is something that they expected or something unexpected, but there has been a reaction. There has been just a great awakening of people who have come to realize the fact that we are being lied to about so many different things, and we are being lied to from so many different agencies, and people are speaking out about it more and more and more. You see it everywhere. And then that brings us to the reaction, which is mainly what I will be talking to you about today, is this whole censorship of truth now. It started out with censorship of, the media. They can only tell you certain things. censorship of books, censorship of things that you see online, censorship of things on social media platforms, censorship of things that you can even buy in online stores. It's happening everywhere because it's like they're trying to put a damper on all of this information that is getting out, and they want to be able to better control the narrative. So, I mentioned before that when we talk about censorship and censoring truth, a lot of times you don't think about schools right away. You think about what I mentioned before. You think of mainstream media when it comes to censorship. You think of social media platforms. You think of Amazon. You think of Amazon Prime. You think of even Etsy. Unfortunately, a lot of people think of the scientific community. And yeah, lastly, we begin to think of the government. But what a lot of people don't understand is that schools have a large part to play in this whole process of censoring truth. And, it can be the most insidious because compulsory schooling controls the content of what millions of children and teenagers learn, and I should even say young adults, because this follows through into college as well. It's not just compulsory schooling, it's college as well. But these schools, they control the content that is being learned, and thus the context with which these children, teens, and young adults view the world. What has happened is that they've removed truth in a lot of aspects, and they have replaced it with moral ambiguity. And, at first there was a lot of pushback to this, and you still see a lot of pushback to this at times. But what will inevitably happen is that as these morally ambiguous concepts are in the schools, people are going to get more and more used to it. And, kids are going to be graduating who were brought up on this stuff. So it's going to reach a point in time where people, at least a lot of people, are not going to understand that there is another way, and that isn't necessarily the truth. What they're being told is not necessarily what they should be told, because our schools are supposed to be morally upright, and we know that that is just not the case. So what happens is, I should also mention that thought is also something else that is censored. We have censored thoughts through political correctness. We have censored thought through hate speech, and we have censored thought through self-censorship. So you have all of these different aspects where you might not necessarily be talking about banned books or banned material, or just like shirts that you're not allowed to buy, or videos you're not allowed to watch, but you're actually talking about the very thought process. The most intimate aspect of a person is being censored, again, by political correctness. And these things are happening in schools too. It doesn't happen just in schools, but yes, it is firmly planted in the school setting. So, through political correctness, a lot of times people are afraid to say what they're thinking. Through hate speech, again, people are afraid to say what they're thinking. And I'm not saying that you should go out there and threaten people and just do all of this, say all these really terrible things. But what I am saying is that we live in a country that has freedom of speech. And that freedom should not be taken away, but that is what is happening. And people are afraid, as with the political correctness, they're afraid to say what they're thinking, because it's gotten to the point where it is like walking on eggshells. You honestly don't know what is going to be taken as hate speech or what is taken as not being politically correct. And, that is no way to live, and people should not have to live that way. And, and that all comes down into self-censorship. People they no longer can express themselves in the way that they want to. And so what is going to happen over time, and this actually reminds me of the book 1984, when they're developing the new language, Newspeak. When you have all of this self-censorship over time, eventually, since people cannot express the things that they are thinking, their thoughts are going to get narrower and narrower and narrower, and it is going to get to the point where they can't think deeply anymore. They can only really grasp the things, the propaganda that is being fed to them, because those are the only things that they are allowed to express in any way, shape, or form and feel like they're safe while doing it. You know, so what happens when you have students who are being brought up in an institution like this, okay, from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. And we know, again, I mentioned it goes up through colleges too. Colleges are some of the worst places for censorship. I think we all know that. As they have all of this happening throughout time, it leaves a populace that can't fight tyranny because it doesn't know its own history. It doesn't know truth, and it has no critical thinking skills left. And, you know, there is a reason for that. You know, they don't want people to think critically. They are safer when people are having information poured into them. Facts and dates, names, only the narrative, only the talking points that they want kids to they want kids to think that they're thinking about this on their own, but they're not. They're being fed a script, and the kids are only being given the freedom to recite the script, and they can't deviate from it at all. If they do deviate from that script at all, they are often punished. Another censorship of truth. So what is not happening anymore in schools, and something that is a major part of a true education, is that children and teens, they're no longer invited to actually ponder the things that they are being taught. They are no longer invited to kind of chew on the topics that they're learning and to come to their own conclusion about what they think about it. They're being fed this technocracy where only the experts are good enough to tell you what to think. And the experts have already, they've already come up with all the answers. You needn't think of anything on your own. It's taken care of. And it comes up in so many different areas in life. And I'm seeing it more and more and more, especially in the youth. Really a lot in, the high schoolers, just this entire aspect of having no common sense left. There is no common sense. But what these kids very often are doing is they are very, very vicious about spouting off the things that they are learning in schools. They are very protective of them. It almost reminds me of like Stockholm Syndrome, where, the victim is kind of like stands up for the oppressor because it makes them feel safer. And I'm almost starting to feel like that is happening a lot of times with the entire school setting. People have been the victims of compulsory schooling for so long because their individuality has been completely crushed out of them, and they've been imprisoned in these school buildings for years and years and years of their lives. Yet people will viciously protect them. And so that thought came to my mind the other day. It's a bit like Stockholm Syndrome. So, and as I was mentioning, it shows in the thought processes of these kids nowadays, or I should say the lack of thought processes. It's almost as if a lot of these kids have a paper next to them of things that they are allowed to say, or different arguments that they should give if people say things to them. It isn't that they're just not thinking for themselves. For example, the other day, someone that I'm fairly certain was a teenager said something on Instagram that 10 out of 10 unvaccinated kids will die before the age of 4 or 5. And, just things like that. And they're not stopping to think that, well, if 10 out of 10 unvaccinated people die before the age of 4 or 5, how did all those people before vaccines ever live? How are we here? How were our grandparents and great-grandparents here? They usually weren't getting vaccinated. And so that's just one example that it is so very clear that they are just reading a script, and they are very, very intent on making sure that that script is known everywhere, but they don't have the mental faculties to actually think about what they're saying. And this all has been from censoring truth. They have been force-fed a false reality. And that false reality that they are being force-fed, it's not a danger to the machine. And that's why they're being force-fed that reality. That reality, that false reality that is being taught throughout schools, throughout all of that time in school, that is censoring truth. Because if they are being force-fed a false reality, they are not seeing the world for what it actually is. They're not seeing events for what they actually are. And they are not having the freedom to use the mind that God gave them to make judgments on their own. And as I mentioned before, it's safer that way. It's safer for that machine that is training kids in this way. And you know, like it or not, compulsory schooling is part of that machine that is trying to shut us down so that we can be controlled. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. And I just want to say thank you so much for supporting me. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram, because you know that YouTube always disables my comments. And I hope you all have a great day.